When you meet somebody, you don't go up and shake their hand with your glove on because you don't really get to know them. And plein air painting for me is like that act of taking your gloves off and shaking nature's hand. It's a visceral experience. You get to really feel and experience what it is like to be in situ, in a place, standing there, experiencing all that is around you. There's more than just the way something looks like. There's also the sounds, the smells, the temperature. It all demands your attention. You have to account for everything that is going on while you're painting this thing. And at the same time, you have to work really fast. You really only have about an hour max before everything is completely different than the way it was when you got there.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Vandal Theory, a podcast about science and research at University of Idaho. I'm your host for the day. I'm Danae Lenz, the External Communications Coordinator at U of I. And I'm joined by Lee. Hi, Lee.
Hi, Danae. I'm Lee Cooper, editor and science writer here at U of I.
Today, we're going to talk about something that I'm really excited about. We're going to talk about plein air painting, which is, very briefly, it is painting outside. Painting the landscape outside. So, my question is, have you ever painted outside?
I have. Just recently, actually, I picked up watercolors, having not done it since I was 9, perhaps. And I think I may have mentioned it before on this podcast, but I picked up a little travel watercolor kit, and on my last trip was able to, sit out on the beach or off my balcony and paint what I saw, take a moment. And it was wonderful. I mean, not the pictures. The pictures are not necessarily anything you'd frame, but it was so nice to just slow down. I mean, vacation, you're already slowing down, but I'm one of those people that has the itinerary going through their head and what's the weather going to be like? And, just being able to turn all that off for a half an hour while I paint the ocean was wonderful.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I have not done it for a while, but I feel like I should have brought this up on this podcast by now, but I wrote and illustrated a children's book for my niece.
How do I not know this yet?
I don't know. I did not know anything about watercolors, but I didn't know what to get her for Christmas. And so I decided to learn how to paint. And the paintings are very amateurish, but I'm still very proud of it. And then it did turn into a general love of watercolor. And I also love sitting outside. And so I would just take all my watercolor stuff outside and paint with the sun on my face. And yeah, it was a very wonderful hobby. And to go off of your point, it's very relaxing. It's very meditative, I would say. Like my brain just empties.
Yes, absolutely. Like, I don't know, to concentrate on that, you can't have anything else in your head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very cool. Okay, so our guest today is Aaron Cordell Johnson. He's a longtime plein air painter and an associate professor of art and design in U of I's College of Art and Architecture. In this episode, he explains what plein air painting is, why artists choose to paint directly from the landscape, and why stepping outside with an easel instead of painting from a photo can change the way a place is experienced and captured on canvas. Are you ready to get into it?
You're drawing me in.
Hi, Aaron. Welcome to the Vandal Theory.
Hi, thanks for having me.
To start us off, can you just give us a little bit of background about who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. My name is Aaron Cordell Johnson. I'm an associate professor in art and design at the University of Idaho, where I primarily teach painting and drawing. As a painter, I am primarily what is called a plein air painter.
Can you tell us a bit about what plein air is?
So plein air, it has a long history. It was made popular mostly by the Impressionist painters in France during part of the Industrial Revolution. Some of the Industrial Revolution is where we got tubed paint and French easels and things that made it easier for painters to go outside and paint. There were definitely people who did it beforehand and did it after, but plein air painting is essentially it's a French word for open air, and it is painting outside from direct observation.
Okay. And how did you in particular get into this?
Appreciation for the outdoors and for being outside started really young for me. My dad was a high school art teacher in Preston, Idaho, and a watercolorist. So as a teacher, my dad had summers free, and on the first day of school being out, he would take the whole family packed in a car for a trip to the great outdoors that often included his paints, and often where we would go would be the Tetons or Yellowstone. That wasn't always just what we would do. The trips were very open-ended, and there was, for example, one trip we started in Glacier National Park and ended on the Oregon coast. And so this spontaneity of being outside is part of my childhood experience. And this experience paired with the outdoors is manifested in me becoming a plein air painter. When I was at PNCA for my undergraduate degree, my major professor asked me, he said, Aaron, and it's the scary question that or the undergrads get. It's like, well, what do you want to do? I knew I wanted to be a painter, but I wasn't sure really what that meant. I remember looking at art history. I remember looking back at art that I had seen as a child or when I lived in France for a little bit. And I remember looking at some magazines and just saying, kind of putting together artwork that I thought looked like what I imagined I wanted my artwork to become. Not necessarily copying what these paintings were seeing, but how did they get that painting to feel like a place? As I was going through, I realized that these were all plein air painters. These were people who were going outside and spending a lot of time observing from life. There's one in particular was his name was Edgar Payne, and he would take his mule, like two mules and his paints, like this 50 by 60 canvas up into the high Sierras and paint for a week. I haven't gone that far, but it was inspirational for me to do that. And then I looked back at and remembered my past. I remembered a long time ago when I was a kid of my dad and I going out and painting in the Cache Valley, and my dad just having a white car with a white hood and mixing his paints on the hood of the car and painting from sight. And so this thought to me came, this is what I want to do. I want to paint outside. And that's really kind of how it started is looking at my past, looking at art history and finding the thing that I was passionate and that I loved. And it manifests itself as plein air painting.
I really love that story about your dad. It's a very visual story and I really adore it.
It's a great memory, you know?
Yeah, for sure. So, why would you or anyone really choose this method over other kinds of painting? Like, what do you get out of this method that other methods don't give you?
Great question. Thank you. So there's an artist whose name is Andy Goldsworthy, and he's a sculptor. He creates ephemeral objects outside, and he has a documentary called Rivers and Tides. Within that documentary, he's working on creating a sculpture out of ice, and somebody asks him about gloves. And he says in the context of that you don't shake hands with your gloves on. And he's referencing, when you meet somebody, you don't go up and shake their hand with your glove on because you don't really get to know them. And plein air painting for me is like that act of taking your gloves off and shaking nature's hand. It's a visceral experience. You get to really feel and experience what it is like to be in situ, in a place, standing there, experiencing all that is around you. There's more than just the way something looks like. There's also the sounds, the smells, the temperature. It all demands your attention. You have to account for everything that is going on while you're painting this thing. And at the same time, you have to work really fast. You really only have about an hour max before everything is completely different than the way it was when you got there. And even within that hour, a lot has changed and depends on what season it is and what time of day it is. So it's a dopamine rush to go out there and chase that light and that the weather and the sounds, and they all just become part of that work. I love to chase the drama of being outside. I love the experience of trying to capture what it feels like in a painting. And when I think about my paintings, what I really want to capture and what I'm really trying to find is almost the feeling that when you look at a painting that I've made, that if you look away and look back at it, there's an that it might have changed because it just feels like it's alive. It's hard to do that, and I don't feel that I'm always successful, but that's what I'm going for. And plein air does that in a way that I'm not able to do in other methods. I'm not able to do that from a photograph or from as much because it's such a static experience. Plein air painting engages all of your senses, where a photograph is just a visual experience. And it could be a beautiful photograph, and there are many beautiful paintings that come from photography, but they don't capture the same thing that I am looking for in my paintings. So that's why I paint outside.
I am not a painting expert by any means, but when you're looking at a plein air painting, I feel like you can tell. It feels like it's moving more than a different kind of painting does.
You don't have a lot of time to get lost in the details. You know, you can, when you're painting a tree, you have to use shorthand. I've compared it sometimes to listening to live music versus studio music, and it's that same thing. There's an opportunity for a mistake to happen when you're listening to live music, and and the musician just kind of has to roll with it and make it work. And I feel the same thing happens in plein air painting. You might make a quick rush decision that you wouldn't make in the studio, but then that decision or that shorthand for something that you have discovered from life can then make its way into a studio painting later on. It helps you discover a different language, is what I really think that it does.
I love that. So when you're out and about and you're wanting to paint, what kinds of things are you looking for? Like, what makes a good cloud?
Well, I tend to think that all clouds are good clouds. I love painting a good cloud, and the Palouse has some of the best clouds that I've ever experienced. What I look for in a painting, there's different types of painting, and there's even different types of plein air painting. And what am I trying to do? Am I trying to capture what it feels like in a place? Am I just out trying to get some painting done? Am I feeling like I'm in a rut and want to try something new? So plein air can be many different things. And when I'm looking for a painting, really it's like a flash of color or a dramatic sense of light. It's not really always content, right? The landscape is a way for me to find a painting, and the landscape and the light and the color is a way for me to get to an experience and to get to feeling the sense of a place. I guess I'm trying to say is that I am not out there trying to say this is exactly what a place looks like. I am trying to get a sense of saying I felt this place before. I know what this feels like. I know what it feels like to be outside and have the clouds moving quickly and the light kind of dropping in here and there and moving quickly across the landscape. Or what it feels like to have the backlit sun shining through trees and the light shining on your face. You know, insert any of those ideas. Those are the types of things that I am looking for. It's just that sometimes I think it's called just like a phenomena, you know, just that sense of a look at this thing right now that's only going to exist for this momentary time. That's what I'm looking for. And some paintings, you know, you have to paint along the way because those don't always happen, but you find them by being out there more.
I guess that's a good segue into what I want to ask you about next. When you are out there, what does it look like? What is your process for finding a spot? Are you out there no matter the weather? Just paint me a picture, a mental picture.
So I call it dedicated spontaneity. And dedicated spontaneity is I'm always ready to go and paint. The paints are in the back of the car. I have an easel. I have paper already taped off and ready to go. I can't tell you how many different times it's been that we are sitting down as a family for dinner and I look out and I can see the pink of the sky and tell my kids and my wife, I said, "Hey, I'm going to go do a quick painting." And it's just part of the what it's like to live with a plein air painter. So in practice, it really is just being ready to go out and make a painting. It's being ready to go out and find something and chase it and maybe not have it work. I showed you earlier in my studio all those paintings that are piled up in the space. And I can't even begin to tell you how many of those are plein air paintings that didn't work. but there's a significant number of them because it's in part working through failure to find that success. It's working through, and the painting may not be a failure, but it means that I'm not getting what I want. For me, it's that combination of finding that spontaneity, that sense of a place, and then having my skills and vision create a piece that embodies all of those things. Some paintings only embody some of those things. The ones that I really love are the ones that embody all of those things, that spontaneity, that sense of place, and my ability to translate that in paint.
Is this something you do year round, or is this a summer hobby?
Oh no, like summer's probably the time I paint the least. I am not a fan of hot weather and blue skies, so it is year round. Some seasons are a little slower than others, but I paint as much as possible, as many days of the week as possible, no matter what.
How does this show up at U of I? I assume that this is something that you teach the students in your classes.
Yeah, so there's always, within a painting class, we have projects that we have throughout the semester, and we do a section on plein air painting. And in the fall, there's an event that we've collaborated with the city called Plein Air, where students and regional artists come and participate in a plein air, not a better word to say it, but it's a plein air competition where people come from the region, and we have an exhibition and a show and a juror and a speaker who talks about plein air and about their work. That's a dedicated, nationally known plein air painter, and they come and discuss with the students. But what I really kind of hope that my students get from plein air, specifically from me, is a passion for painting, right? Like that's for me what I get from plein air painting is this passion to be out there, this passion to create, this passion to make something and to translate an experience into paint. So whether or not my students end up being plein air painters, I want them to do what they want to do, but I want them to do that with the same passion that I have for plein air painting into whatever it is that they want to do. So I hope my passion for plein air shows them an example of what their passion for whatever type of painting they want to do can become.
I mean, I don't see how not. You're making me want to pick up my watercolors for the first time in a minute.
Do it.
So, okay, if someone who's never tried this before wants to try it, what do they need to do? What do they need to have? How do they get started doing plein air?
So I would say pretty simply that really it is a desire to try it and the resilience to push through the difficulty of it not working and and then just continually pushing to figure it out. I think one of the hard things about plein air is that there is and this could be maybe even for painting and art in general, is that, oh, it's fun and I'm going to go make this thing and it's going to be good. But the reality is that it is a time, like it's an investment of time into something, an investment of working through those challenges and figuring it out. Now, as far as just in painting for plein air itself, you don't need anything fancy. You don't need a fancy easel. I've taped a piece of paper to my car window and used a $5 palette to mix my colors. I will say nicer paints, papers and brushes and sketchbook and pencils are wonderful. And I will always suggest that getting the best materials you can afford is a great way to start. But also don't let that get in the way of actually starting. The real thing is just to go out and start doing it. And then, of course, I think time. Give yourself that time. It's not really easy to get what I see in my head when I go out and paint and I'm looking at this scene and I have a vision of what the painting is going to look like. That's hard to get from this three-dimensional space that you've chosen out of all of the world that you're looking at. You've chosen one little rectangular spot that you're going to then translate from three-dimensional space to two-dimensional space, but make it look like it's still three-dimensional space. And it takes time to do that. So you have to just do it, look back at what you did, see what didn't work, see what did work, and then apply that experience to the next painting.
Awesome. Well, Aaron, thank you so much for being on the podcast. This has been an absolute delight.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being here.
All right, Lee, what did you think of that conversation?
I think probably the best is just he's so excited about what he's talking about that, you're just sitting there grinning, listening to him and itching to go pick up painting as a hobby. Probably specifically what I really liked as a extraordinarily amateur watercolorist was that he talked about the fact that when you're going out there, you're not necessarily trying to get it perfect, have it a perfect representation of the landscape. Because you have to paint fast, and it changes within the hour, like you said. Which is very nice when you are a perfectionist and being released and being told that you don't have to paint the tree perfectly. You can just, check its vibe, make sure the tree vibe is there. I definitely fall into the category of, is it millennials or people that, we make the joke of if you're not perfect at the hobby right at the start, if you're not like a savant right out of the gate, you just quit. I do fall a little bit into that category of if I'm not really successful, I'm like, no, I guess this isn't for me. But he's giving me permission to just go get the vibe of the tree. And my little splotchy tree doesn't have to be perfect.
In fact, if you spend so much time making it perfect, you'll miss the clouds or the setting sun,
So true.
Yeah.
You're going for the vibe of the whole landscape.
I think it's very cool. I love hearing him talk about engaging all of his senses, and is painting. So why are you talking about hearing while you're painting? But hearing him say that, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Because, if there's birds chirping, it probably just like heightens the joy of the moment. And yeah, anyway, I love this conversation so much. I was smiling for the entire time, and genuinely, the weather's turning around, and I think it might be time for some outside painting.
I heartily encourage that for you. Yeah, no, I found it really fun. And another thing I found really interesting was the fact that he said that sometimes he goes out and paints, and the purpose is not to create a painting, which blows my mind. But it makes sense. Like, sometimes he's out there trying a new technique, or, I don't know what some of the other purposes would be, but it's not always, again, maybe it's going back to the perfectionist thing of you're not necessarily trying to make this perfect thing that you can hang on a wall. The purpose of being out painting might be just the act of painting.
Yeah, the purpose is being out painting, and it's self-contained, and it's wonderful.
All right, we should just end this podcast so we can go outside and paint.
Okay, everyone, thank you for listening to the Vandal Theory. You can visit our website at uidaho.edu/Vandal Theory to learn more about our research. Email us at vandaltheory@uidaho.edu. We are on all of the podcasting platforms, so please rate, review, and subscribe. I'm Danae Lenz.
And I'm Lee Cooper.
Thanks for listening.